Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt from Divination Counseling Service, here to present the second part 2, if you will, of relationships. So I had decided that I didn't want to make the video very long, and there were certain things I still wanted to go over with you. So we're going to be looking at today 2 charts. These people have passed away, but they'll actually be seen again because these are charts I'm actually going to use for some of the rectification work that I want to do down the road. Perhaps a lecture is coming this way. But with regards to that, I'm going to use these 2 charts, and I'm going to use what is known as a sun chart. That means that the sun will be very close to the midheaven for both of these charts, because I'm going to use noontime. A lot of astrologers use noontime for things, and we can get some pretty good information from that. And I think we're going to get really good information from it today. But with this said, I do want us to be aware that we will not be using real times. And therefore, some of the work we're doing on the houses will be more for educational purposes rather than perhaps accurate information from these 2 people. Though I have to tell you, I still think we're still going to be accurate. I don't know these 2 people very well at all. I did meet them, so it wasn't like I don't know them. They're not complete strangers to me. But I know some things, and so therefore I think we can really make this an educational lesson. So before I begin, as always, I want to say thank you for watching the video. I want to especially thank all of the people who have already been subscribing to this channel. Thank you, guys. With that said, if you would, please consider becoming a subscriber. But in the meantime, if you would, like, share, comment. I'd love to hear from you. So I would say to anybody, if you have any questions, or if there's something that I'm talking about that maybe you have your own sense about, I'll say even opinion, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. So with that said, let me explain what we're going to be doing. I'm going to be pulling up 2 charts. We are going to look at the 5th and the 7th houses. But I want to emphasize something today. Though I am looking at a married couple that was married for a very long time, and they were each other's only marriages. And I thought that would make it interesting because I know we're going to be able to see that in the charts. But I do want to impress upon everyone watching this video that I am looking not only at significant others in relationships. What I really want us to do is use this for all kinds of relationships. And I'm putting an emphasis on that because partnerships of all kinds can be read through the charts. And that means business partnerships. Anybody who's getting into any contractual agreement might want to look at this astrology information, particularly if these 2 people are building something together or are working in tangent on a particular project. It is essential information and can teach us a lot, not just about the partnership, but what the function of the 2 people might be within that partnership. So once again, I do want to stress that I'm not saying that this is only for significant others. Quite the contrary. It's for everybody. So I'm not going to look at this from a relationship / Davison type view. I'm not going to be using planets in love, though they're a married couple. I'm doing this because I think for all of us, there could be an incredible education just looking at how 2 people can interact with one another and how that interaction, that camaraderie, creates its own entity in some respects, particularly if we're talking about composite. So I'm going to start, we're going to jump in, we're going to look at both charts individually. I'll throw them together as a bi-wheel and then look at the dials for the Heras and the Minervas. So I'm quite ambitious, once again, but let's just see all that this has for us to delineate. So we're back. Oh, I always have to switch cameras. So we're back. And as you can see, as always, noon chart does put the sun right inside that 10th house because this now makes it a midheaven chart or a sun chart. So we're looking at somebody who does have a 10-degree Gemini sun. And we're going to notice things about the sun, like immediately 4 degrees away, there's a volcanus. So this might have been kind of, I almost want to say, a person who maybe who walks into the room and everybody notices. And it has a lot to do with that volcanus, because if you think about volcanus is pressure. Okay. So, it might be like almost a magnetism, and that would make this person have some kind of charisma, the word I'm looking for. Okay, so we see that, although I'm going to say that the charisma could have worked as much against them as for them because of the black moon Lilith there. So as Lilith is there, there's this kind of maybe was part of a karmic lesson. So black moon Lilith, and we'll just call it Lilith for short, or BLM, but that could be, Black Lives Matter. But anyway, but basically that volcanus is coming in with that person, that individual. And it may be that they had some really, good karma coming in related to the volcanus, but I'm kind of thinking it's stuff that they need to learn to let go of. And maybe that was the lesson in his lifetime. So we don't know. I knew this gentleman only briefly. So, but look at that Mercury. Okay. So almost a Sun Mercury person, which is mercurial, meaning charming, outgoing, so they were somebody, and good communicators probably, especially in Gemini. And so this chart features a, look at that Chiron up there. But see, again, this is not the true chart. So in order for us to really nail this individual down, we would have to work from the sun. So since we're not really concerning ourselves with this individual, and since he probably no longer cares because he doesn't need the chart anymore, he's no longer having to, doesn't mean anything anymore. This chart, though, is going to be our example. So one of the things I wanted to point out, which I thought was so cool about this chart, was look at the trine on the 5th house, which is perfect. Okay, now, again, I did this as a noon chart, but what a perfect trine. And it would talk about somebody who would put a lot of importance on love. Although, in this case, it's Saturn ruled. Love might have come in terms of responsibility. The irony of ironies is I know for a fact this individual did have 4 children, although I do see 5 placements, one of them being an ascendant. So, but there were 5 children, or 4 children, excuse me. And, or was it 5? I think there was 5. There was 5. See, that's what I mean. I don't really know the person. So this chart could be somewhat not, it could be somewhat true. So when we look at this, it would say that the love affair of this particular person would be something that was more in line with the practical, and that though this is a charming Gemini, probably very charming and outgoing and sociable, from what we gather in the chart, this individual was not gussy romance, but maybe more practical. Okay, I don't know that for real. I can assume that though. And then when we look at, now what's really interesting in this chart, and you'll see this, is I believe that she is a Pisces. Actually, yes, she is a Pisces. As a matter of fact, they have squaring suns. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit though, but look where his moon is in Virgo, okay? I'm thinking I'm closer to his real time than hers, just based on some of the things in the chart, and that's why I'm starting with hers. But I do want to point out that one of the things that you want to look for in a relationship, and this is any relationship, and it works even well in friends relationship, is the idea of having someone's sun opposite someone's moon. And with the moon, you can go pretty wide because times are not always accurate, but honestly, these people have it almost head on, which is why I put this chart up and I'm like, wow. Okay. Now, interestingly, he has, look at this, Jupiter, Mars, Moon. Okay. In Apollon, I think he had a very blessed life. As a matter of fact, I know he did. I know he did. I know that he would tell you he had a blessed life. Okay. But you know, what's really interesting is I think that the reason why he had such a blessed wife was because of his wife. And why do I say that? Because the moon is sitting right there. What made this man successful was his wife. Okay. Now, that's not something that we might see even if we knew the couple. Okay. She was actually a stay-at-home mom. She was an artist. But she made his life possible. Maybe giving the reason, there's that Mars, you know, but also I think she gave in to him on a lot of things by looking at the chart. I think that being a Pisces to a Gemini, as soon as there was a conflict, I kind of think, you know, she was passive aggressive, but she certainly was probably never direct. Okay. Plus, he's a Volcanus sun. My goodness. Right. So this is a very blessed man. Okay. There's several things here that I also happen to know about this individual that makes me believe the chart's fairly accurate. And I'm not really going to get into those things because that's not really important in this. What's really important is we look at these people as a relationship, a partnership, if you will. The fact that her sun falls into the seventh house is another indicator that we are in an accurate situation here with the chart, because her moon falls in his first house, so he can identify in and through her. But also her sun falls in the seventh house, the house of partnerships. So you see, I'm not even really talking as much about that fifth house anymore. And I think that with any partnership, even in married couples, I don't think that we need to think about married couples in terms of romance. Because I think once you become married, especially when you have children, particularly the number of children we know that exist in this family, 2 girls and 3 boys, I would say to you, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense, actually. So the partnership now is centered around having a successful home life. There we have it right here. Being able to even express himself emotionally and have his feelings literally resolve into something that is in action. Okay. This was somebody who was very used to having their own way too, by the way. So, you know, and here's a woman who says, oh yeah, let him believe he's having his own way. It works. You see? It might not work for him to be with another individual, but it works perfectly fine with the woman that he's with. Okay. So let me pull up her chart. Okay. Okay. So now we have a different chart. Okay. And you can see that I used her sun falls literally right on the midheaven, the time of year that it is, spring. And so, you know, her chart is more spring-like. Okay. So I would think that her time is needs a little bit more adjusting than his. That would just be my immediate glance. But again, I'm not really honing in on these charts for these 2 specific people in this case. We already know their marriage lasted the whole lifetime. So we want to look at it and show maybe factors to why it did. Okay. Now, the reason why I don't think her house, look at the children she would have had. So it's just very interesting. I don't believe her chart is as accurate. I do believe that she could have been born probably more with, you know, a different, you know, so she could have been born something that would have put the moon in a different place. So I'm going to start off with that. Her moon did fall in Libra, and I suspect that it would probably be in Libra. It could be in early Virgo in this case. And if it were early Virgo, it would, see, her sun is in the 7th house, but Venus, that's what the thing I want to talk about. The moon and the sun were Venus, not sun, the Venus was completely opposite. So I'm glad we went and looked at this, because remember, that was a 12-degree Virgo. Okay. So you have to remember these things. This is where it gets like crazy when you're an astrologer. This is why I keep a lot of notes. So we were looking at, but look at the sun is at 23 degrees. So though the sun and the sun are not in conflict, there isn't a square there. Okay. I do want to point that out because the sun at 23 degrees is not aspecting his 10 degree. There's 13 degrees in there. Okay. At 15 degrees, you're in a completely different aspect. So in this particular case, the suns are not square. How would it be if they were square? Well, I think it could have still been a relationship that would have worked, but it would have been far more difficult, particularly while they were younger. I find that squares do okay in relationships, and as they get older, you might even be prone to suiting yourself up with somebody who is a square. Because there's some excitement in a square and you get a lot of work done in a square. So there's a lot of advantages to the square. But when you're young, the amount of work that you have to do within the relationship itself can be very trying. So they didn't have that. Okay. So that's a good thing. What they did have was that Venus opposite Moon, which is romance. Okay. Venus, Moon opposite Sun. Okay, which, by the way, we could go out to, because his moon was either 12 or 13 degrees, we can go 10 degrees, barely aspecting. But it does cause for instant friendship. And maybe because of the dynamics of the Venus moon, which is romantic, then the friendship, even though it was like that wide, would have had a better shot. Okay? So I have her 7th house, and this is how you would read it. And again, I got to go through the rules because this is important. So as you're looking at a person's house, you want to look at the cusp as well. Now, we already know that this chart's probably not very accurate, but if you're looking for yourself or if you're looking for somebody else, you want to use this. In this case, this house, this 5th house, is ruled by Venus. Okay, so this is a woman who was more romantic. And by the way, she was more romantic, I will say. But I also feel that as I look at this chart, that the 5th house being that her expression, and she was an artist. So that isn't off the mark either for her. Okay, now, her moon is in Libra, and that would have qualified all of that without the 5th house. But if you were reading this, okay, one of the things that I would point out here is that the house cusp is at 28 degrees, which is very literally coming to the very end of that Libra. So that she has an intercepted 5th house, which is interesting because she almost had to be now, and again, this is probably not her chart, so I'm just going to do this as it were a universal person and say that, okay, so here we have somebody who needed to understand that they had to get past their love the idea of loving the idea of being in love. In other words, Venus ruling, and I just want to be in love. Actually, they have songs about that. So what am I saying, So, when it's Libra, there is a tendency to really romanticize that whole concept, right? But there's actually a transformational quality to this individual's being in love. It transforms them. It transforms who they are. Okay. And it doesn't necessarily mean that only in this relationship that we're going to be discussing in a minute. No, it means that as she is coming of age, as she is going through life, this person, and again, I don't believe this chart's accurate completely. I think that this person would have had to have a lesson about, you just can't think about love as love. Oh, I'm in love and it's going to solve all of my problems and so romantic and all of that. No, love is transformational. You see the Scorpio? Okay. And so that means that ultimately what's been intercepted is Pluto. So you would look at that as an astrologer. You would have to take that quirk, if you will, into account. Sort of like I looked at the Vulcanus and the Mercury of the gentleman. Because there's still going to be those people in that relationship. And remember, last time I did a relationship video, I did talk about the fact that relationships are not perfect and that people are not perfect. And that it's more about not having your issues be affected by the issues of somebody else. Okay? So as I then go to this chart and I look at the mothering on the descendant. Yes, this is a mother. This was somebody who, once she married, became a full-time mother. Of course, that was also the age. So, but she did. It's on the chart. So this is where I go with, well, the chart's not totally inaccurate, is it? And that's why the asteroids are sometimes really, really helpful. It doesn't mean that when we rectify this chart, because I'm actually somebody who had a chart done and then got it rectified later, because I've been an astrologer a long time. And the interesting dynamic of the theme, particularly of who I am, was completely the same, regardless if we're going with the original chart or the one that was rectified. I think the bottom line was I am who I am. But I would have been that way with either chart, because for some reason, even when you use these kinds of charts, the amount of aha moments is still there. You just have to take it with a grain of salt, because you have to realize this may not be the actual real for this chart. So, but that is wonderful. When I saw it, like, oh my God, that's awesome to have, Demeter there. So right there too, on the descendant, how are people seeing you as a mother? How do you react as a mother? So it's pretty good. But there's something else here. And what's interesting is her 7th house is ruled by Saturn. His 5th house was ruled by Saturn. I don't know if that's true or not, but how interesting would that be? It would mean that they have a relationship that's based on glue, even when they didn't like each other too much as the years went on. And I'm not saying that they didn't ultimately love each other all the time, but let's be honest, sometimes in Saturn relationships, there are little bits of resentments and there are lots of feeling of too much responsibility. And we did look at how much she was responsible for. So it does appear that she could have had situations where she might have felt a bit resentful. So, there could have been a lot of reasons for that. So, and again, some personal habits, and I won't get into any of those things because I'm not getting into that, but realize that that was meshed into this relationship, and it didn't deter the relationship. They were still married a very long time. So I think, well, their whole lives. So I think that Saturn, though it can be a task maker, though it makes us mature and grow up and all of that, it also is glue in a relationship. Okay. So we did go. So if you're in business, other houses to look for would be the 6th house, because that's the house of work and service. So in doctor-patient relationships, in employee-employer relationships, people who are even working together, the 6th house would be emphasized. Okay, same thing with health, because health is also involved in that house. If you're in business, you want to look at the 6th house. If there's how you're doing your finances, because the finances might be getting shared, check out the 8th house. The same would be true. These people were married. And, in this case, I see Uranus. And I do know that this gentleman, as much as he came up in an age where his wife was a housewife, he did not necessarily encourage his daughters to go that route. He really was ahead of his time. And I think that, I see that Aquarius here, but in this case, it's her chart. And it makes me wonder and Saturn is there, remember? Okay. So I think it is about finances, and it might be about the fact that from the onset, there was a plan to educate all 5 children, even though 2 of them were girls. Okay. Which is the children would be in my generation, maybe my generation a little bit younger. So believe it or not, I know, hard to believe, but there were issues still with some people educating females. Okay, I know it sounds weird. It's even weird coming from my mouth, but that's true. The highlight of her chart, in my opinion, is the connection of the Venus. Yes, it does square her sun, which means that I think that he did have to learn and grow and a lot through their relationship. And it would have been a Venus thing, to appease the woman he loves, basically. So you would always go back to that. Couple of other things, and I'll do it from her chart. I'm going to pull them both up. But in her chart, Mars is conjunct Cupido. And in this case, it falls in the third house, ironically with the South Node. And that's not going to change, by the way. That Mars South Node, that is in effect in this chart. And I do feel that being the housewife, raising 5 children, and doing all of that on her own, I think was very burdensome to her. And I do feel that, perhaps it did feel oppressive at times. So, though it was what she was meant to do, isn't that ironic? And then Node Neptune is an interesting concept. South Node Neptune, I actually have the opposite of her in that respect. But I can tell you that Node Neptune probably meant that some of her connections or her timing, or she probably would have been a woman who would have been far more successful if she'd been born at another time period. And maybe that's all it's saying, that she wasn't really able to, fly. She also had Mars retrograde. Okay, so let's talk just one moment about Mars retrograde. These are people that can't really get angry. They don't know how. They really don't. The only way they know to be aggressive is passive aggressive. I've known many, and I really do feel like other people tend to walk all over them. I do feel that because they're unable, really, they're indecisive often, and it's in the sign of Virgo. So, need I say more? It's mutable as all heck. And I think that really can be in and of itself a difficulty in a relationship. Okay. I think that when you start looking at things like Venus and Mars, and we'll do that right now, you want to look at things that, now we don't have any. I think I did look, and that's why you're looking for things that would be out of bounds, which is a health thing, out of bounds. But otherwise, she is nothing really out of bounds. And I would say that let's do the same for him. So let's check this out. Okay, so in his, Mars is conjunct the moon. Remember, we already discussed this. And also, just a quick peek, but Venus is here. And it's interesting because, and I've seen this before, okay, remember that her sun is 23 degrees of Pisces. Remember that his sun is 10 degrees of. So he has a square to the moon, which means he has a lack of confidence, which is going to affect his relationship with women. Okay. She has that Mars retrograde. She's indecisive when it comes to her anger and direct action. So these people had issues, and this is one of the things I like to point out, but those issues apparently just did not affect them as a couple. Yeah, it did, but not enough to destroy their relationship, not enough to unstick the glue. And that's really important, okay? So I did want to just go through that. I think it's really important because I just love the squares to the sun, and then the Venus opposite the moon, and squaring the sun. And so what you see here is that the Venuses were pounded through this relationship. Now, obviously, it's also financial, and they had a lot of children. Okay, and I think that even though they were not poor, they were not poor people, I still think that they had to put the clamper on certain things, maybe things that they would have done for themselves, but they couldn't because they had children. And so even though there was, money, they couldn't be frivolous with it because there was children to consider. And I got to tell you, in both charts, the children would be a big deal. Okay. And ways to see that would be in her chart, we saw the Cupido and we saw the mother right on the descendant. And with his chart, the Cupido is close enough to the south node. So again, having the family was expected. But it was also the thing that I think was sometimes what would make him maybe miss opportunities or his timing was off. And that's how it is, right? But yet there's a node with Cupido. He also was, especially when his children got older, he wallowed in that concept of, these are my sons and they look like me and all that cool stuff. But anyway, that when you look at relationships, it is always important to kind of get a grasp of the individual. It doesn't matter what kind of relationship it is, okay? But in this case, we're looking at family, and so I looked at that. If you were looking at business, stick with Apollon, stick with Zeus, and so here we go with make it applicable, make the partnership applicable to whatever it is that you're studying in astrology. A lot of times it jumps out at you anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Next, I'm going to throw both charts up, and this we're only going to do because we can, okay? So I'm back and we have two charts, and you lose a lot of your asteroids when you do this. The only asteroids are the ones that are really built and embedded in the program. And I always tell people that, a couple of things that are really easy to do is just to kind of go around a chart, gather up your numbers, so to speak. And when you look for asteroids, look for ones that will fall on house cusps. And not only house cusps, but what are the rulers? And again, you're not doing all 12. You're only doing what's applicable to what it is you're looking at. Yes, a story builds as you go through, but you always have to be disciplined enough because otherwise a chart will take you on great journeys, sometimes for no reason, and they go nowhere. So, a couple of things here I wanted to point out. They were both the same age, and so there are already Saturn conjunctions, and I think that's really interesting. Also, Saturn is there now, which is interesting. I'm going to be using their charts for a few things because I don't think they'll care. As a matter of fact, I know she won't. But also look at some of this other stuff, like remember that Moon and Mars that were together in his chart. Well, look how close it is to her Jupiter. It improves her life. It expands who she is. So there was, and again, Jupiter on anything means there was happiness, right? So that's a really good factor. The things that I think are really interesting is that her South Node is affected by Mars, but so is his. And so as he would go through things, so would she. And the same thing with Cupido. It would be over the family because their Cupidos are very, very close. But I do want you to see this. This is what you could do, like we would say Sun and the vertexual ascendant is very close to his midheaven, but we don't know that this really is. But these kinds of things are things that we would look at. His sun not only works with his Volcanus, but it pressures her Volcanus as well. But Black Moon Lilith is actually closer to Vesta here for her. And I think sometimes it was the work and goals that she was here for, and also to let go of. Okay. And interestingly, she did have a job, and she did a career actually, and she actually let go of it when she got married because women did that then. But you can see how the rest of the chart is going to line up because other than having different birthdays, they really were both born in 33. Okay. And that it really does affect how the chart will be laid out, because obviously when you're doing the flip of whose sun falls in whose house, or moon here in third house, her moon, his third house, his moon, her first house. I'm sorry, no, it wouldn't be her first house. We'd actually have to go look on her chart. What we would do is, whoever you're looking at, you want to find out, for example, that his sun actually, or her, I'm sorry, her, let's go with something else, because you have to look at her stuff. Like her sun falls in his seventh house. We already talked about that. Her midheaven is there as well, but then we did do those charts. But that's the stuff you look at. Okay, then I would flip it. I would turn hers as the inner chart, and then it would be all her house cusps. And his chart would be on the outer edges, and then I would read where his stuff fell. So I want to keep moving because I still want to look at dials with Hera, and because we're looking at a partnership, we're going to look at Hero, we're going to look at Bano, and we're going to look at, as well as Venus, we're going to look at Juno. Whew. Juno, Hera, Bano, and Venus. So let's go do that. Okay, so I lied. We aren't doing the dial yet because I wanted to do the dial in the composite, I can't even talk, chart, okay? Because in a combined situation, and once again, you could do this with any partnership. I did not do relationship where they do it a little different with the Venus. And no, I did not do that. I could have, they were married. But I wanted for us to understand that midpoints work just as well. And that if you're going into business with somebody, you're not going to want to do a relationship chart because it's not going to be accurate for your usage of that partnership. The partnership is going to be used in a very different way. So when I look at this chart, this becomes another person. And the chart creates a completely different chart. So I now want to look at the fact, and this is really mind-blowing, so I'm glad you're seated. Do you notice that both the sun and the moon are in signs that are ruled by Venus? Over and over again, I see that no matter what we use for timing in these two charts, we see that these people, this was a love relationship. Okay, and I think that's really important for us to acknowledge. Okay, I think they dearly loved each other. But you know, there's some interesting things here. Now there is a Uranus Sun. Yeah, they're at the midheaven. Okay, but remember we use two noon charts. But look at this, Uranus Sun. Wow, at the midheaven. But coming from the ninth, which I think means that as their children grew, they changed. They changed how they presented themselves to the world. Okay. I don't know that because I did not grow up in this family. My mother's actually still alive, so can't do my situation. But the look at this, another token to Venus. Conjuncts the sun. Do you understand that the sun is not going to change? Uranus is not going to change. Venus is not going to change because the ascendant, descendant, midheaven doesn't change. That's why I use dials. To really be honest with you, I think what really turned me into a dial astrologer was the fact that sometimes we get charts, and especially if you're working with, I've been an astrologer for decades. And in the very beginning, okay, like nobody has any birth information as far as their time is concerned. So many hospitals didn't do it. If they did it, they didn't do it accurately. And that's why rectification becomes a really big subject in astrology. And I'll get to that at a later date. We'll probably be using the same charts. You get to know these two people so well. So anyway, I just really loved that. And I really wanted to show that in this. You know, it's beautiful having, you know, the 5-degree Libra and then the 2-degree Taurus, you know. And by the way, they were a practical couple. I mean, they raised children, they educated children, they set these children up. Okay. So they were able to do that. But I like that there is an element too of they're educated, they're more enlightened with this Poseidon moon. Because I would go that far with this moon. So a very beautiful, again, I'm not sure what houses they would ultimately fall in. I just think it's really exciting to look at this as this is it. This is this couple married. Okay. It's, Aquarius descendant and, look at the Clotho things that are started behind the scenes. So there's, again, Zeus right there. They had a lot of children, 5 children, which by today's standards, that's a lot of children. And, even when I was growing up, a family of 5, even though there were more of them than there are now, was not that common because already children are now costing money to raise. This is like the first generation that got the shell shock of how expensive it is to raise a children. Before that, not quite so much. They were more like free labor children were. So it was a whole other ballgame. But as times have changed, people have to educate these children. People have to clothe and feed these children. And everything costs money. So I thought that was really beautiful. Again, the chart shares the South Node to Neptune. There is a second and an 8th house nodal system. So there really is, and the nodal system, I wouldn't go by 2nd and 8th house. Again, I'm not so sure of these houses. I want to jump to a dial like immediately because I just feel like I don't want to get too much conversation going on it because what is it going to mean? So what we're going to do instead is we're going to go right to the dial. And then, of course, we'll add in some of these asteroids. But you have right on the Aries point a midheaven node. I mean, they were a united front, okay? There was some issues. I'm not going to say there were a little bit of an alcohol issue somewhere along the line. I'm not going to get into it too much, but there was a lot of transformation because of that. Okay. So we could do an Aries point thing, and it's always fun to do that. So we're going to go about to there. And this is pretty much how the Aries point for this couple. And to be honest with you, I think they were motivated by what was going on in the world. So I think that they were, educated people. They were people that were in the know, so to speak, or they were knowledgeable about their world and what was going on in their world. Let's see. Saturn is very close. So, maybe it's because of the time period they grew up in. That's what it reminds me that, perhaps that's why. So anyway, but if you were to look at these people in terms of as a partnership, you would do an extensive study of the 7th house and any other house that was viable to this particular relationship or bonding. Then you could go with things like, here we go. I got to go around the wheel. Here we go. Here's one. Okay, so I'm going to start here with Hera. Okay, and what I would do is I'd start building a story about Hera. Okay, and surely these midpoints will tell us. But one of the things that's really curious here is look at Hera. Here's a marriage, and it goes right to being parents. How much of this marriage was about being parents? That is not going to be true in every situation. They married to have a family. They agreed, I would bet you, on that before the fact. But that kind of really, that goes ding, 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 ding in my brain. Okay, so down here, you also have that the partnership is very much the surrounding. So mom didn't do a lot without dad, and dad didn't do a lot without mom, and that includes making decisions in the household. They were a united front. And you would look at this in a chart, okay? So, and this is what I always do. You go back in, you do your math. Let me give me some scratch paper. Not that I don't have tons of it. And I would take a number. I'm going to go with, so we're looking the exact, well, we're going to say right around. Okay, so I'm going to say around 23. Okay, so that if I were going to go 2230, okay, I would literally be at 30 right here. So that Cupido again, holy carolies. To have a family, to be productive. And there's a lot of, this is a praying family, you know, if they go through things, they come together. They've had family things that, you know, oh, this is awesome. Perfect. Okay. So in the end, they're pretty tight. And then look at this, Sun ascendant and Venus ascendant. It's about their love. So beautiful, isn't it? And you could do the same then. That was just one. Then you could do the same over here. And again, ascendant Sun. And that's Juno. Okay, so these children only learned about functioning in a partnership, which is kind of bodes well for more successful marriages. And look at the Mars Jupiter for fortunate action. Okay. Again, I would probably take the time and pull in the asteroids that are not on the wheel and maybe get a bigger story. But I wanted to go through this just for you. So let's go to Venus now. Let's do them all, right? We're just going to breeze through them. Oh, wait, I didn't do... so if I'm 2740, I'm going to be 310. I'm sorry, 22. It would be 510. 510. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh my God. Get ready, guys. It's the moon. It's a little bit further, but you know what? I made my point. I made my point, didn't I? This is a real partnership, right? They had their disillusions with one another, trust me. But I'd say in the end, they were both happy with their lives. The lives they created together, which is kind of beautiful. I mean, you can't really ask more than that. And they were the patriarch and matriarch of a family, a larger family that became an even larger family as they do. So cool. So cool. I want to do one more. I have to look it up. So let me see if I can, well, you know what? This video is getting really long. The only other asteroid that I would have added into this that I did not do, and now that I realize what I would have had to do, because these are midpoints, I'd have to do a lot of math. So maybe it's not worth it. The same thing with any asteroids. When you're doing a midpoint chart, now in this case, what you try to do is get a birthday that was in between these two charts. But this is where it becomes really complicated because you would have to do all of the math between her Bano, his Bano, and what's the midpoint. You could do it. It's not that hard. And you're not doing that many places, but that's how you would do it. I would go in and grab each of their Banos. Actually, let's just look at that. Okay, I know that I had showed, okay, let me just first of all say that his Bano is 25 Leo 12. Her Bano is 27 Cancer 52. Obviously, Bano is something that moves, rocks and rolls, okay? So the midpoint, and I did it on a dial. So, okay, so if this is where his is, and hers is literally on this chart's vertexual ascendant. The midpoint for the two, and that's really interesting that hers fell in such a way. His was near so many things too, like the midheaven of the chart, which was really interesting. But remember, I'm not paying a lot of attention to the midheaven. But the point in between would be 4132, which would be right around Kronos. Okay, so the Bano of this chart would fall very close to the Zeus Kronos situation. It's interesting because, this was a family where dad went to work and, he left every day and mom was pretty much home on her own. And it's interesting because we have that somebody's home on their own in there. Okay. And it's very close. So that's how I would do it. Okay. Is you go in there, you do the math. I did it with a dial. I added those 2 points. 25 Leo 12 comes to 55 12. And then I take the 2752 because we're in the first quadrant, so they're all by their regular numbers, and add them up and then divide them by 2. So you can do it the same way that you would do it the long way traditionally, which is to change Leo into a number between 1 and 365. So, which is when we get into the bigger numbers. And, it's all the same. I just quartered it. So it didn't matter. I just used it as 25 fixed 12. It could have been Aquarius. That's how I did it. Just makes it a little easier. But look, we can still get a lot of information. They're really bonding, these people. Okay. It's really interesting. It's a great bonding. Great for the word associated with Kronos. So let me come back. So I'm back. I just want to say thank you once again for watching the video. And I really do want to stress that I'm covering some things here that for some people, very basic. For other people, there could be questions. And I really would love if you have questions to ask. So, wrong camera. Why do I do that? Anyway. Sorry about that. Thank you for watching the video. Anyway, I really am an educator and I don't mind questions, and there's no such thing as stupid questions. And even if you don't agree with some of the things that I say, I'm always open to debating these things. I've been studying astrology a really, really long time. And I'm very open to what I call astrology discussions. So I'd love to hear from you. I really do want to leave it at that. So before I jump off, I do want to say, as I always do, besides thank you for the video, that until we meet again, I wish you all only happy